generally I don't like calling it Agile. I would always say to, let's say, somebody who's very cost accounting driven, I would say, basically, wouldn't it be great if I just took a small amount of work and created just a couple of low-risk prototypes before driving up any costs on using expensive manpower and tech and unnecessary coding, so that we can actually get our idea that we have about solving this problem in front of a group of potential users, and actually first seeing if the ideas fly, because now people can actually visualize and interact with this possible solution that we have. And that's where you lean on the kind of lean thinking, which I'm always a great fan of, because you want to build the right thing at the right time, and you don't want to build any unnecessary functionality and generate waste. When you're talking about knowledge workers, because of the unpredictability, because of the variability in the work that we do, no problem is the same. No solution or product that you're trying to build is like, they may be similar, but they're all going to have their own nuances. So, at the end of the day, you want to be able to create an environment where you try and foster safety in a team. You try and leverage off the collective intelligence of a team. So, when you're bringing in some of the principles of the Agile Manifesto around sustainable pace and ensuring that at the end of the day, you don't have burnout in your teams. That's always great. At the end of the day, it's all about fostering that in Scrum, we talk a lot about promoting self-organization in teams. It's about, and I think that's one of the largely misunderstood things, for instance, about Scrum. It's largely where the team, the people who've got skin in the game and who do the work are empowered to actually make the decisions on their own. I mean, Kanban talks about encouraging leadership at all levels. So there's a lot of overlays with all these different frameworks and moving parts within the larger Agile sphere. I also think when you are looking at managing expectations, you want to be transparent as one of the pillars in Scrum. So, you don't just want to highlight, let's say, your roadmaps in terms of what you think you're going to build. You have to have an understanding about technical debt. You should be aware or have tools that can run code scans, that can find vulnerabilities, that you're using your data from what's rolling in from your bugs, that you're looking at your different monitoring tools, whether that's Sentry, Splunk, Grafana, all those kind of tools that give you some insight as to what's happening on the technical space. And that's very important also, for product managers, for development team members, because, if you're applying Scrum and you're making these sprint goal commitments, you need to split the work not only about building new stuff, you need to, highlight and manage the expectations of your stakeholders and the market about, if you are having to make compromises with a fixed deadline, it's against quality, it's against perhaps some of the user-based research that you need to do before you launch that product. So, the more of that you peel away, the higher your risks are. So that's always a good thing to use as well in terms of explaining to people about the benefits of Agile. User behavior trends through different monitoring tools like Mixpanel or others, that all you're trying to do is negate any risk and any blowback that they might have regarding any idea they're trying to do. My last comment on that as well would be, also to make visible the work that's actually happening in an organization, how people are making their decisions on the work that currently exists and what they're planning to do going forward. And that's where Kanban is extremely powerful, by making work visible, showing where there's blockages, and where flow is not being optimized, and being able to show progress through with these cycle time metrics. There's way more. There's whatever we try and do, it also takes a long time to necessarily become evident, and when it does, if you do it really well, nobody really notices. So the difficulty, well, how was it before and how is it now? I think, again, with all the uncertainty we went through with COVID, I think you'll see that the companies that did have an adaptive mindset, that did value innovation thinking, and that were open to change, were the ones that flourished during this time. And your more traditional cost counting project management firms, yeah, they've struggled. I guess it's also about the scale of some of these organizations. If they don't really have too many competitors, it's very hard to convince them. But just really reel back to your question around, has Agile coaching changed? I think at the end of the day, yes, indeed, it is. I mean, the Scrum Guide was amended in 2020 to adapt to more, to a changing environment and marketplace. We have to be more sensitive to particularly the big job losses that are going to be coming down in the future with the increasing capabilities of artificial intelligence. So we play an active role there in being able to, help people set out in their individual coaching plans, what is their learning paths, what do they need to be aware of in terms of their own career developments, what do organizations need to do to recruit people and retain people if the actual capital that they have is the collective intelligence of the teams that they have. So it's definitely, there's still a lot of focus on the soft stuff, which I think is critical. But I do believe that Scrum is not enough. So as a Scrum Master, only focusing on Kanban and Scrum frameworks and the Agile Manifesto, it's not going to cut it. If Scrum cannot, in my opinion, operate correctly, if you don't understand at least and the link to continuous integration and continuous delivery, where you can regularly build quality software and predictably release it. So it's all tied into the Agile Manifesto, but there are different dependencies that you must understand from, just being able to implement Agile successfully. And now I know there's another question where I'll elaborate a little bit more on this, where you start getting, if you don't understand the interaction and dependencies of these different concepts, how Agile can be incorrectly implemented.
I think it was so interesting how you brought up the fact that artificial intelligence is just going to replace so many jobs. But I was really interested when you spoke about that coaching, just to help people find what they're actually wanting to do and how it could impact. I think that's not something that people really know about Agile coaches. It's normally just like, how can you make the software development teams run faster, or how you can get them to get things out at a more rapid rate. So I think that's a pretty unique side of it, which is very interesting. So what are some poor practices of Agile that you've seen implemented within software development or data analytics practices? And conversely, or if you can't really think of that many, can you think of some examples of super performers or companies who have been exceptionally good at implementing this way of thinking or working, should I say?
So let me maybe give some examples where you can apply a framework like Scrum, where you get your team the best continuous integration and delivery pipeline that allows you to have, easily deploy any coding that you do from your local machine to your source control engine. You then branch your work into feature branches, and then you do a couple of builds, you run some tests. You can seamlessly compile, you can seamlessly develop, test, and deploy your code. The teams have got the most beautiful burn down charts where all the time they're burning their story points off against that ideal gray line. Everybody's happy. The only problem is, and that's why it's so important for you to do user-based research, making sure that you apply a lot of the lean principles, because if you take a bad idea, you can implement it extremely efficiently through using Scrum. And Scrum can be weaponized. I've seen it so many times where at sprint reviews, they bring out burn-up charts or burn-down charts and cumulative flow graph charts. That is not for your stakeholders. They've got actually no real business needing to see those numbers. That is just for like story points for the team to debate whether they agree on the ambiguity, the risk, the complexity, the effort that it takes to build a user story. If one person says, I think it's a 2, and the other one says it's an 8 on the Fibonacci sequence, you want to pick that stuff up early. Yes, over time, if you're working on one thing and after a few weeks you start stabilizing those numbers, you can get better at guessing. That is a guess. And I don't think there's anybody sitting on this call who hasn't been asked, when is this going to be finished? And the only answer is like you can only base your decisions on empirical process control theory, or just simply by looking at historical information, basing your decisions on what you know. And what you don't know, you've got to go and experiment, so that you can actually confirm any assumptions before you build anything. So it's very hard in ensuring that you understand how these tool sets can be abused and misused. Because project managers love Scrum, all right? Because at the end of the day, it answers some of the questions that concern them about forecasting and predictability and managing budgets. But in the Scrum guide, you can stop a sprint in mid-sprint. In Lean Startup, they talk about being able to pivot. So even as a product person, it's about the fidelity of the plan that you are developing. So trying to know everything up front, you can't. And particularly just before you're launching, it's very important to rather prioritize the things that you don't know, so that you know what spikes and experiments and fail-safe things you can do before you really get into the thick of things. And I would always say, if you're writing user stories on your story map, I would say have about, if you're working in 2 sprint cycles, I wouldn't have more than 6 weeks worth of stories that are pretty, that have been written up with some acceptance criteria, that are tied up to your sprint goals, and that you can take through refinement sessions and story point. Anything beyond that, you're going to do an extreme amount of work, and you're going to drive yourself nuts because things are just going to change too quickly. So, and look, there's lots of techniques to go about that. I don't have time on this session. Maybe we can talk about some of those later. But at the end of the day, you've got to be able to keep a balance between your sort of vision planning on a very high level, and then your tactical planning where you're using a bunch of tools that manages that middle layer. And then, as far as possible, you defer your operational planning to just what you can do within 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay, I think that's so interesting, just trying to balance that vision versus tactics. I know in product now, it's the hardest thing to remember that you still have to plan for the future of the product when you're getting lost into the day-to-day of fixing the nuts and bolts and trying to reduce bugs and calm stakeholders and all of that jazz. Before I continue with my questions, Ed and Cherie, do you have anything to ask before, or are you guys good?
Yeah, from our side, actually, I'm just learning a lot. I mean, I don't really know much about Scrum. I've followed more traditional project management, and so this is all new to me. I do a lot of data stuff, so picking up new knowledge is great. So that's what I'm picking up.
Okay, let me just. Yeah, can you see what Cherie said? Oopsie. Can you see what Cherie said in the chat? Otherwise, I'll read it to you.
If you can just read it. Sorry, I don't have much I could go.
Cool. That's an amazing question, Cherie. So where does Scrum end and release management begin? So where would you say the Scrum process ends and then the actual release management of a feature begins within that context? Because you're right, there are many overlaps.
So at the end of the day, look, you're going to base your release planning on your story maps, and so you'll have a bunch of scrums that add up enough critical mass, scrum sprints that'll add up enough critical mass for your releases.